Hello, today is Wednesday, August 13th, 2014, and this is the third episode of Crypto Convos. I'm your host, MK Lords, and today I'm joined by the mellifluous Dr. Stephanie Murphy. You may recognize her velvety voice from Let's Talk Bitcoin, Free Talk Live. She also works with Free Age. She's involved in a lot of different liberty projects. She's also a scientist and is a voiceover artist as well. So she's joining us from New Hampshire, and thanks so much for taking the time to be here, Stephanie. How are you doing?
Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm doing great, and thanks for that awesome introduction.
Awesome. Well, it's so great to have you. So I know you're very active with Let's Talk Bitcoin, but I'm kind of curious, what is your personal philosophy? Where did you kind of start, and what has kind of been your journey philosophically to get where you're at now?
Oh, gosh. Well, I like to say that everyone is sort of born an anarchist, and then it gets beat out of them through various methods like, school and just culture, living in this authoritarian kind of culture that we live in. So I think that was definitely true about me. I've always had sort of a questioning nature. I don't really like to just accept the status quo. I've always been like a little bit of a contrarian. And that didn't really coalesce into anything too coherent until I was in high school, and I kind of read Atlas Shrugged, and then from there I just kind of made some liberty-loving friends and started learning more about just, classic libertarian stuff like Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises and stuff like that. But for the first part of my journey towards liberty, I guess I was really more interested in like economics and even politics a little bit, although I never really got super into politics. I just sort of thought it was, tolerable or whatever. But as time went on, I really started to get way more interested in the personal instead of just the political. So that's sort of where I've ended up at the age of 30, which is where I am now, really interested in getting more freedom in my own life. And you mentioned that am a scientist. It's true, I have a PhD in biochemistry, but what you didn't mention was that I actually used to work in science, and I also went to medical school for 2 years, but I made a major career change and started working for myself, and now I'm a voiceover artist. So that was one of the ways that I sort of put my philosophy into practice to get more freedom in my own life by just adjusting the job that I was doing, which is a major thing if you think about how many people just have jobs that they hate, where they spend most of their time, and they spend more time there than with their significant other or their family sometimes at these jobs which they really hate. So I decided to sort of take matters into my own hands and start working for myself, and I'm really happy I did that. But yeah, I guess, do you want me to label myself? If I had to label myself, I would say I'm a voluntarist, I guess. I really value voluntary relationships between people that are based on genuine consent to participate rather than any kind of coercion. So of course that extends to the state. We don't want to buy these services oftentimes of bombing other countries around the world, or even just having the government collect our trash every week or whatever, but we're forced to, and I don't like that. I would like human interactions to be based on a mutual desire to be there. So I think that just applies to all relationships, and that's sort of where I'm coming from.
Awesome. So how did you find out about Bitcoin, and what were your initial thoughts? Do you see Bitcoin as a tool to further this kind of voluntary society?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's important to say that because Bitcoin started out as a very explicitly uh, disruptive, even anarchistic, dare I say it, technology. And it's kind of strayed away from those roots recently as more people have come in and it's become more mainstream. I think people kind of forget what the original intentions behind Bitcoin were. And if you read Satoshi's works, then it's pretty clear what they were. But where I first found out about Bitcoin was on the radio show Free Talk Live. I'm actually a host of Free Talk Live on Sunday nights, but I'm also a fan of the show, and so I've been listening for many, many years. And back in 2011, I want to say, they started to talk about Bitcoin on the air on Free Talk Live. And now this is like a nationally syndicated radio show, so it's a pretty big deal. They reach a lot of people. And they actually had Gavin Andreessen personally, who was a fan of the show, personally meet with Ian and Mark, who are the main hosts of Free Talk Live, take them out to lunch, and because at the time he was living pretty close by to New Hampshire, in Massachusetts, I think. So Gavin took them out to lunch and explained Bitcoin to them. And I don't know if they completely got it, but they sort of understood why it might be exciting to have sort of this like this digital form of the ability to exchange value, and sort of got the idea right away that it's kind of like precious metals in a way, in that it lets you opt out of the monetary system, but it's not physical. It's all on the internet. It's like this thing for the internet. And why, in this age where you can send an email to anywhere on the planet where someone has the ability to receive it, can't we do that same thing with money? Like, doesn't money need an upgrade? So I think they got that right away, and they started talking about it on the air. And so I heard it right away. I was kind of intrigued. I didn't completely understand it at first, but then it started to kind of catch on in the Liberty community here in New Hampshire. And as you mentioned, I'm in New Hampshire right now. I moved here 8 years ago in 2006 because I was interested in the Free State Project, which is basically a community of libertarians living in New Hampshire and getting active for freedom, whatever that means to them in their lives. So it started to really catch on, Bitcoin did, very early on in the Free State kind of community and among the people who worked at Free Talk Live or listened to Free Talk Live. I remember people really early on like buying food for Bitcoin, and they would pay like, sometimes like 5 Bitcoins for a dinner, and when Bitcoins were like $1 or $2 each. And I remember there was these Casacious coins that were circulating around for 1 or 2 Bitcoin Casacious coins, and people would kind of trade them around with each other. Some people were like, no, I don't want to take that Bitcoin stuff. Give me some silver, There was definitely that going on. But I think over time people realized that Bitcoin is actually a lot easier to handle than silver, especially as more apps came out. Like, it's just easier you don't have to worry about making change or having the exact amount or like carrying this heavy thing in your pocket. You can, unless you're doing a Casacious coin, but it's significantly lighter than silver. But yeah, I mean, it was just like way easier to use, so people started using it. And I would say Bitcoin really clicked for me when I first downloaded the Bitcoin QT client, and I learned how to create a Bitcoin address. And then one of my friends, George Mandrick, who's still involved in the Bitcoin space, he basically sent me like 1 Bitcoin or half a Bitcoin or something like that, and I got it, and it popped up, and I was like, wow. I think I was chatting with him at the time, and he sent it to me, and I was like, wow, you just sent it, and I just got it. Like, that was pretty easy. And then I sent some Bitcoin to someone else. Like, I sent a tip to some podcaster. So I can't even remember what my first transaction was, but I sent it, and I realized, wow, that was just so easy. And from then on, I got it. I understood why it was so cool. And not to mention the idea that it lets you really opt out and have more control over the way that you're trading value with other people, the way that you're tipping and bartering or whatever. So yeah, it just sort of felt like a natural fit to someone like me who's always been interested in sort of alternatives or outside the system type stuff. And then Free Talk Live kind of continued talking about Bitcoin. I got interested in it. Once I got the bug, I started wanting to learn everything I could about it. And so I didn't really participate in the Bitcoin forum, but there was bitcointalk.org that was huge, of course, from the very beginning. So I read a lot of threads on the Bitcoin forums. I would listen to people discussing Bitcoin. Like, there was no real Bitcoin podcasts or radio shows, but Free Talk Live kind of became that by default because a lot of their listeners caught the Bitcoin bug, and they'd call in and they'd ask questions and they'd have discussions about it on the air. So they really fleshed out a lot of the issues that and just common questions that people have when they get started in Bitcoin. So I just kind of became this voracious consumer of Bitcoin knowledge and tried to teach myself everything I could. And yeah, from there it just kind of became an obsession, and it sort of stayed that way. I'm a total nerd, so it was kind of funny because at the time when I was working in a research lab trying to finish up my PhD, I was also getting really interested in Bitcoin, and I would talk to other scientists about it, and they wouldn't have a clue what it was, and they'd be like, "Bitcoin, what are you talking about?" You know. But I would just sit there all day while I was waiting for things to finish in the lab, and I would read the Bitcoin forums or read about Bitcoin. I even mined Litecoins at one point. I found out how about Litecoin, and it was kind of at the time when I started mining, it was like a little too late to use your computer to mine Bitcoin. I was like kind of late to the game, but I found out that I could basically use my computer to mine Litecoin, so I did that for a little bit just to experiment with it uh, while I was at work. So I remember sitting and waiting for these experiments to finish and trying to mine Litecoins at the same time. I didn't really get very many, but it was fun. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started in Bitcoin.
That's awesome, and it was really the practical, hands-on using it that kind of won me over too. There were the charity elements, of course, but being shown how easy it was to use because I don't come from a tech background. I had read a lot about it, but it still wasn't quite clicking for me how it worked. So just being
Yeah.
able to send it, back and forth between people, it's just so much easier to use. And it sounds like coming from the background that you come from, it was probably a little bit easier for you to maybe understand some of the more technical aspects, or was it still quite a bit of a learning curve for you?
It was still kind of a learning curve. I mean, I know how to use a computer, and I've been on the internet since the 90s, but I don't have a background in computer science at all. Like, I'm just not the same breed of nerd that most people who use Bitcoin early on are. Like, my PhD is in life sciences, so I'm totally in the biomedical realm rather than the computer science world. So it definitely was a challenge for me to understand. And still, I don't really consider myself like a super technical person. But you're totally right that like when someone is just learning about Bitcoin, you could sit there and kind of lecture them about it for hours, and maybe they would get it and maybe not. But if you just show them how to use it, if you just like send them a little bit of Bitcoin and then have them send some back to you or send it to someone else, like they will just instantly understand what it's about and why it's so cool.
Absolutely. And Let's Talk Bitcoin is such an informative podcast for people in the Bitcoin community who are looking to learn more. And I mean, you guys go into such depth. I really love listening to it. How did you get involved in Let's Talk Bitcoin?
um, yeah, so Let's Talk Bitcoin has been going on since April of 2013, which was right around the time when I made my personal kind of career change from working in science to being a full-time voiceover artist and a radio host. So it was kind of a exciting and scary time for me just personally. And one of the things I was doing at that time was like building up my portfolio to showcase voiceover projects that I had done and get some more clients under my belt, hopefully. So a friend of mine, Justice Ranvier, actually met Adam B. Levine, who is the main host of Let's Talk Bitcoin on the Bitcoin forum, and told Adam that I was a voiceover artist, and he had said that he was starting a new podcast, and he needed someone to do like a podcast intro outro for it. And Justice knew that I did podcast intro outros as a voiceover artist, and so he hooked me up with Adam. And I actually made an intro for his podcast, which at the time was going to be the Daily Bitcoin. And they were actually going to do a show about Bitcoin every single day. And they had recorded like 2 or 3 episodes already, but they wanted a professional podcast intro. So I made one, and then Adam sort of heard me and knew that I knew about Bitcoin and knew that I was a radio host, and he said, well, why don't you just be on the air with me? And so I said, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. So like one episode with one of the other co-hosts who was on the Daily Bitcoin show, and he was in Israel, and it was just like we were trying to record over Skype, and it was just such a nightmare. The latency was horrible. So basically there was a reevaluation of like what format the show was going to take, and that's when Adam decided to go with a twice a week format instead of once a day and changed the name to Let's Talk Bitcoin, and also brought on Andreas Antonopoulos, who's the third main host of Let's Talk Bitcoin. So we started doing shows together, and we ditched Skype and we got on Mumble. And they're both based in California on the West Coast, and I'm in New Hampshire. But it really sounds like we're in the same room. Like the technology is just awesome. The latency is really low. Um, And so we're able to do the show together that really sounds like we're very connected, physically, even though we're totally on different coasts, which is pretty cool. And then we just kind of started recording like once or twice a week, and we started going to Bitcoin conferences and like interviewing people. I did a lot of that, going to conferences and just talking to whoever I could grab. I brought a little handheld microphone, and I would just kind of walk up to people and say, hey, do you want to be on Let's Talk Bitcoin? And got a lot of cool interviews that way. And when you talk to so many people in the Bitcoin world, you just get a lot of different perspectives, and you hear a lot of really interesting stuff. Like one of the things that comes to mind for me was there have been like actually several people who have told me like off the record, like they didn't want to admit it publicly, but they're like pretty high profile Bitcoin people who said that basically they heard about Bitcoin for the first time because of WikiLeaks. And of course WikiLeaks back in, I think it was 2012 or early 2012, something like that, was trying to accept donations, and they got kicked, they got their account frozen by PayPal, they got kicked out of Bank of America, Visa, MasterCard, Chase. None of them would process payments for WikiLeaks. And this was all done totally extra legally. There was nobody who ever passed a law that said WikiLeaks is bad. Not that that would be legitimate if they did that, but they never even tried to do that. It was just basically pressure from some Congress critters in the United States, and all these banks and financial institutions just cut WikiLeaks off from receiving donations, and so the only way they could get money was through Bitcoin. And these people were sitting there, more than one high-profile Bitcoin person who you wouldn't really think of as necessarily someone who is really bucking the system or like super anarchisty or anything like that. But they said that they found out about Bitcoin and now are working in the Bitcoin field because of WikiLeaks. So I thought that was really interesting and cool. And you just hear a lot of stories like that, both on the air and off the air.
Yeah, you meet such a variety of people at the conferences, and just you see it in the space, and you get challenged on a lot of things that you've already believed, which I think is really important, because they're bringing in a large amount of them are anarcho-capitalists or libertarian leaning, but there's a certain percentage too that are not affiliated with those philosophies, and so it's cool to hear so many different perspectives because it does have such a broad appeal. And a similar thing happened with antiwar.com when they found out they were being spied on by the FBI and their donors were being targeted, and that's why they decided to take Bitcoin too. And it's so great for nonprofits, especially if you're a controversial one, because if you're doing something that's very controversial and the government doesn't like it, and you're speaking out against some of the things they're doing, then yeah, they're going to try to shut you down. You see this happen all the time. So this is such a great tool for radical activism, and these people who are providing such great resources to people like WikiLeaks and antiwar.com, and that's what really I've been drawn to, kind of that part of Bitcoin. It's such a radical technology, and it can be used for so many radical things. And you
and not even radical things. I would say, like, yeah, it is great for that and for politically maybe unpopular causes or whatever, or politically controversial, whatever you would call that, kind of organizations. But it's also great for organizations that are just totally normal but may have some risk, because like the financial controls in the US are just ratcheting up all the time. I mean, I would have never thought, if I think back 15 years ago, I guess maybe I was young and naive, but I always thought of when I put money in the bank, that is still my money. It's just that the bank is holding it for me, and whenever I want to get it out, no matter how much it is or no matter why I want to get it out, I can do that. And if I want to put money in, same thing. I can do it. It's my money. They're just being a custodian of it. But now they've just turned into these monitors and these sensors for what you do financially. And if you move over $3,000 in or out of an account, you get these suspicious activity reports filed on you to the government. And there are millions of these things filed every month, as I understand it, and a lot of them are on just totally innocent people who are not even doing anything like to speak of that they shouldn't be able to do with their own money. There's this Operation Choke Point, where certain types of businesses can't get bank accounts or getting their bank accounts closed or shut down for really no apparent reason, except that the banks are kind of scared to keep the accounts because the government's putting pressure on them. And if you think about people's ability to do financial transactions and to basically do what they want with their money, which represents their work, their labor, the things that they've done, the value that they've created for the world, hopefully. I mean, some people get money other ways than that, but a lot of times it's, you've earned it, right? Your money is what you've earned, and you should be able to do what you want with it. And financial transactions are actually a form of speech. You're often choosing what to do with your money based on values that you hold or ideas that you believe in or things that you want to support or things that you want to not support. And so really, censorship of financial transactions is very similar or akin to censorship of speech. And when you start going down that road, it's a really slippery slope. What kind of freedoms do you actually have left if you can't speak freely? And Americans are just kind of like, well, it'll never happen to me. It won't happen here. But it does. It will happen to you. I mean, I heard a story of, recently there was someone that I knew, like an acquaintance, who had a hole in his roof, like a tree fell on his roof or something like that, and he needed to get it repaired because like water was going to go in his house. And so his parents sent him like $14,000 or something like that to fix his roof emergently, and the bank wouldn't let him get it out because it was a large amount of money according to them, even though he needed it to fix his roof. And so that's just one example. There's so many examples of how just innocent people get caught up in this stuff. There was a reporter, as I understand it, who was in Afghanistan and reporting in Afghanistan, and needed to buy a plane ticket back, but of course he was doing stuff in Afghanistan, and the bank saw that and said, oh no, he must be a terrorist, and froze his account. He couldn't get enough money to get back. He has no way to access his funds, and he ended up working in a quarry or something so he could get a plane ticket home. It's insane. This is the kind of stuff that happens when we have third parties getting in the middle of financial transactions, criminalizing what is essentially speech, and just stomping on civil liberties. And for what? What has been the result of that? Has any crime been actually prevented? I think there are still people dealing drugs. I think there's still people, using money for nefarious purposes. It's just that they're having to change the way they do business a little bit. So, at what cost do all these things come? It's really, I don't think this is the price that you have to pay for civilization, the price of being eternally controlled and tracked on everything you do. And of course, Bitcoin is not perfect in that regard either. Bitcoin, it can be traced and tracked and so forth, and there's ways to analyze it, and the privacy aspects aren't perfect. But it's really interesting to see the demand or the great need, I think, or the desire in the Bitcoin community or the cryptocurrency community for more private ways of doing financial transactions. Like the interest in Darkcoin and Bitcoin mixing services and stuff like that, and all the research that's been done on those kinds of things really indicates that people are kind of hungry for the ability to have financial privacy and to be basically the sole decision maker about their own finances.
Absolutely, and the public ledger is good for a lot of things, but yeah, ultimately you don't want everyone knowing your personal financial business, and the banks already know so much, and like you were saying with these suspicious activity reports, the legislation is so insidious that you can be fined and thrown in jail simply for not filing a suspicious activity report on someone, and this happened to Charlie Shrem. This is one of the charges that he's facing, and Charlie is someone who tried his best to be as compliant as possible with the regulators.
Sure did.
And yeah. It's really kind of depressing to see because as many people, there are a bunch of valid criticisms of the system, but a lot of people think, well, you just have to bow down to it, you just have to comply with it, or it'll completely crush you. It doesn't matter if you're trying to comply with it. They can crush you anyway if they're really wanting to make an example out of you, which I think they're doing in Charlie's case. But how do you find Bitcoin, protecting like micro entrepreneurs. You gave a really good talk at Bitcoin in the Beltway on Bitcoin and micro entrepreneurs. How has that helped you in your personal life as a voiceover artist?
Oh yeah, thanks, Megan. Thanks for asking about that. I remember you were there at the conference and you actually helped organize it and did an awesome job,
Oh,
Bitcoin
thank you.
Beltway conference. And you're gonna be helping with another one too, right? Coming up, is that?
Yes, Coins in the Kingdom. Actually, tickets just went on sale today for Coins in the Kingdom. So
Woohoo!
I'll have the link up for that. Oh, it's going to be cool. It's basically magical internet money in the Magic Kingdom. So, oh, it's going to be such a fun party. It's going to be kind of a different approach from some of the other conferences. It's going to be a little more laid back, but it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's cool. I love it. Well, so to answer your question, yeah, as I mentioned before, I recently made this major career change and started working for myself for the first time, which is awesome. And I'm a voiceover artist or a voice actor. Never really know what to call myself, but basically I produce audiobooks, fully produced radio commercials, video narrations. So like, if you see an explainer video about a company, sometimes it'll have a voiceover, saying the words or telling a little story. That's basically what I do. And it's a really awesome job because I can kind of do it potentially from anywhere as long as I have a microphone and a decent sounding setup that sounds good quality. And I can work from home. I can work in my pajamas. Doesn't really matter. Just any time of day that I want to do business, I can do it, as long as my clients are happy. And I really work for. I said I work for myself, but I really work for my clients. So that's kind of what it's all about. Is like seeking out those relationships and trying to provide some kind of value. But I did give a talk about microbusiness at the Bitcoin in the Beltway conference. And the reason I picked that was because I'm really interested in microbusiness. And what that is like, it's kind of a buzzword. You may have heard micro entrepreneurship or microbusiness or even micro lending, which ties in, but it's something different. And micro business is actually like over 90% of the businesses in the US, just by like, if you look at every business as like one separate business, over 90% of them are micro businesses, which means they're small businesses that have few or no employees and don't really require like tons of startup capital to start. Usually they say less than $50,000 to start up a micro business is about what makes it a micro business. So it's really like this revolution that's happened in the last couple of years, I would say, even. It's really exploded. There are more people who are, a lot of people in our generation, I think, have this horrible student debt. They have these college degrees that aren't serving them at all. They went to college for something that's kind of basically useless. It's not what they're doing, in their career. And there are lots of people who realize that if they don't make jobs for themselves in our generation, if they don't make jobs for themselves, then they're not going to have a job. You really can't depend on just some company to hire you and then keep you for life and have this job stability, which even older people don't have that either. So entrepreneurship is really the way to go. So what are people doing? They're taking the skills that they already have, maybe based on their hobbies or based on something that they know how to do, and they're teaching on the internet. There's like online courses are huge. There's like a lot of people becoming coaches. A lot of people doing writing or like contract work for other companies or for clients that they might find on the internet. There's even people who are outsourcing like household tasks. There's like TaskRabbit and like those services where you can do stuff for people in exchange for money. There's Airbnb, like people are renting out places online, and all of this is happening sort of in this realm where people have control over everything that they do. It's a real like client and provider relationship. Like these big gatekeepers are kind of going out of the picture, like hotels or taxi services. Now we have Uber and Airbnb as a solution to the problems that come with things like hotels and licensed taxi organizations, mainly high prices that aren't serving all the consumers. Um, so I find it really interesting that there does seem to be this attitude of entrepreneurship that's experiencing a resurgence. Um, at least I notice it going on, maybe because I have my ear to the ground. but more people are becoming entrepreneurs, and more people are doing business on the internet too. And so it creates this perfect environment for small entrepreneurs to really embrace Bitcoin. Um, and we could say all this stuff about just, the currency of the internet, but to give you some concrete examples, I frequently work with Aaron Koenig of bitfilm.com. He's a movie producer, and he makes animated films like explainer videos or other types of films. He's actually been doing a film festival in Berlin for about 14 years that showcases his work and does a lot of animated stuff, and does a lot of work for clients in the Bitcoin space wanting to make explainer videos about Bitcoin-related projects. And so I've been working with him to voice some of his videos for quite a while. There's a video that's really cool called Mycelia in Wonderland. It's about the Mycelium app. And so I played Mycelia, the voice of Mycelia. And
I was hoping you'd bring that one up. I love that. It's the cutest video ever.
Yeah, thanks. I thought that was a pretty cool project. I mean, he's really talented, and it's always super fun to work on those projects. But he's in Berlin, okay? So he's a German guy. I'm here in New Hampshire in America. And now, if we were just not Bitcoin people, this might be a little bit complicated for me to get paid. Because what would I do? I'd have to send him an invoice, and then, maybe it would be in dollars or euros, or I'd have to convert from dollars to euros, and maybe he'd have to mail me a check or do a wire transfer, and there'd be a $15 fee on the wire transfer. And so if I'm getting paid $100 for the job, then I've just lost 15% of my pay. Or he could send it through PayPal, but then maybe PayPal might lock down my account. What are you doing? Why did you get an international transfer? Or they would take 3% out for a service fee, and then I lost 3% of my money. And so, mailing a paper check, that has its problems too. That could take, weeks or even a month. I've had clients mail me checks before, and it literally took a month to get paid from the time that I invoiced them. And if you're a freelancer who's just starting out, or you're kind of like struggling or whatever, you got bills to pay, it may not be prompt. It can be kind of an issue when you don't get paid for a month. But with Bitcoin, if Aaron wants to send me Bitcoin for a voiceover job, I just say, okay, here's the amount of Bitcoin I'd like. We agree on a price, and I give him an address, and he sends it, and 2 seconds later it appears, and it's just that easy, basically. And then, maybe I use it to buy some stuff on Amazon. I'll get a gift card through Gift and buy it on Amazon, or maybe I save it for later. Maybe I use it to buy something else. Who knows? I could do anything pretty much I can do with dollars with Bitcoin. So as a freelancer and as a small business person, Bitcoin is just the ideal for not only dealing with international clients, but just any client. Where else can you receive a payment in 2 seconds and have access to it and be able to do anything with it that you want?
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that I started doing, I realized my college degree probably wasn't going to go anywhere. I dropped out before I fully completed it and started. I started doing hula hoop performing and stuff like that, along with serving tables to kind of supplement my income. And I think there's a strong entrepreneurial spirit in our generation too, because we don't have these, safety net things to kind of look forward to. So
totally.
It looks like we've got some good questions from Dale Dickens. We've got a couple. Let's see, he's asked a few. So I guess we'll start with. He asked one, are you now a micro business, which I think you answered that already. You're a micro business on your own.
Yeah, I consider myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's one. How did you become a voiceover artist? What was that process like? I know you mentioned you were a scientist and then you made the transition.
Yeah, so the story actually starts back in 2009. I was working on my PhD, and just as a hobby, I was hanging out with a friend of mine, Mike Barsky, one day, and we were just talking about, wouldn't it be cool if there was like a relationship podcast, but for libertarians, like that offered relationship advice or sex advice, but like from a liberty perspective, because sometimes you hear Dan Savage or whatever, and I'm a big fan of his, but occasionally he'll talk about voting and like throw in like, yeah, the government should be paying for health care and things like that, and I just didn't agree with that stuff. So So we decided to start our own podcast, and that was Pork Therapy. That was my first podcast. So there was kind of a learning curve. We had to teach ourselves how to use Audacity and record the shows and post them on the web. But it was great because not only did I learn about podcasting through totally trial and error, but I also learned how to make audio quality sound decently good and how to build websites and use WordPress. And those are really important skills if you're going to be a podcaster or just an entrepreneur in general. So I did Pork Therapy for, I think, about 5 years. And during that time, I got a lot of people who were commenting on my voice and saying, oh, you have a really nice voice. You should make audiobooks or something like that. And the first time I heard it, I thought, oh, that's really kind, but I didn't take it too seriously. And then the second 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times I heard it, I started to take it more seriously. And so I thought, I'm not really happy with this career that I'm in right now. And I'd like to do something that gives me more location independence. And I'd like to do something where I can work for myself and sort of make my own hours and be my own boss. So voiceover actually sounds really good to fitting those criteria. So I started looking into it more, and then basically I just kind of volunteered for work. I volunteered to do podcast intro and outros for my friends who were also podcasters, and that was a great experience learning how to do that. I also volunteered to make some commercials, including for like the Porcupine Freedom Festival and just things that I supported anyway, learned how to write and produce radio ads. I volunteered to produce an audiobook. Actually, the first audiobook I ever made was Markets Not Capitalism, which was a huge project. It took me about a year to finish, but I finally finished. It's a 16-hour audiobook, so oh my God.
A long book, a very long book.
It was so long, but I finished it, and I got a really valuable experience because I learned, yes, this is something I enjoy doing and something that I could do. And I had some really cool people who kind of supported me and sponsored me during those projects because they knew me from my podcast. So I was able to sort of like get some clients and make a portfolio. So I sort of started to transition to voiceover work even before I quit my day job, essentially. But then once I went full-time with it, I built a website for my voiceover stuff, and I just put up the material that I had already done as demos. And then I went out and started auditioning. So I joined Voice123 and Voices.com, which are two websites that are really popular with voiceover artists. So basically, you become a member, and then you get sent jobs that you can audition for. And if the client likes your audition, they'll hire you for the job. So I started just sending all these auditions, and that was awesome because I got to practice all different scripts. And I got some coaching, like I went to some webinars about acting and like interpreting copy. I took an improv class to help with acting because I had no background in that stuff. And honestly, when I started, I listened back to my older stuff, and it sounds really robotic and like the acting's not very good. But yeah, it's a learning process, just like anything else. Nobody's really proud of their like first work in anything they start out with. So I'll just try to always get better. But yeah, like I ended up being really successful on Voices.com and Voice123, and also started getting some people just randomly coming across my website, contacting me, asking for quotes through my website. And then I marketed the fact that I was a voiceover artist on Let's Talk Bitcoin and on my other podcast that I was a part of. So that was great because the radio listeners had already heard my voice, and so they knew what I sounded like, and maybe I was kind of planting the seed in their mind for the next time they needed a phone greeting or a commercial or whatever, they would give me a buzz. So yeah, that's kind of how I built up this small micro business being a voice actor, and I'm really, really happy with how it's gone so far, and I'm going to keep going with it for sure.
Yes, that's awesome. And I wanted to issue an apology to Dale Dickens. She's a female, not a male.
I know Dale too. I totally thought Dale was a guy, but hey, Dale. Nice to meet you. Sorry about that.
Thanks for that clarification, Dale. Sorry about that. So she asked, oh, this is cool. I kind of want to hear this too. Can you please give us some examples of different voices? How do you create them?
Oh, it's always fun when you get an audiobook and it has like different characters. So like, you might have a Southern belle. Hello, Megan.
Yes.
Or you might have a New York accent. You know, that one's kind of easy. You know, you take the dog for a walk, you get a cup of coffee. It's really annoying. I don't like to do that one.
It's really good, though.
Or you could have a British accent. Australian,
Nice.
Dale's from Australia, right? Let me try. Let me try to put on I can't do Aussie accents. But if I wanted to, what I would do is just, basically watch YouTube videos of native speakers. That's basically the easiest and most fun way to learn a new accent. Oh, I did not show my Russian accent yet, but I like that one too.
I love that. I actually have heard that one before. I was listening to Brian Sovereign's podcast, Sovereign Tech, and I hear the Natalia. It's like, oh,
Natalia.
So sexy. Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks. I love that question.
Awesome. Oh, great. I'm so glad. That was a great question, Dale. Thank you. And she actually has a few more, so we're going to, let's see. Hold on. I got to find my order here.
Sweet. There was some dude who commented on the Google Plus event who asked me, who was kind of made this trolly comment like, what scam coins is Stephanie promoting these days? And I would just like to say to him, he asked, how is Dogecoin working out for you? Okay, I don't have any Dogecoins, and actually I've never supported Dogecoin. And then he asked about BitShares, and actually BitShares is coming out with DAX. So they're building their product, and I still think it's pretty cool.
All right, yeah. Thanks for kind of clarifying. I saw that too, and I was like, oh, I don't know. You can come into the question and answers if you want to. You know,
that's fine. Whatever. I'll answer a trolley question. I mean,
yeah,
fine.
yeah. There you go. I don't have, the altcoins, I don't have a whole lot of time to do a whole lot of research into all of the different ones. There's just so many to keep up with. Someone gave me a bunch of Dogecoin, so like I have some. I never bought Dogecoin, but someone gave a bunch to me, so I was just like, oh sure, I mean, why not? You know, but I really, I'm not.
What's a bunch? Because like 5,000 Doge is like $1, right?
Yeah, it was like 3,000 Doge or something. You know, it's like it looks very impressive because it's like 3,000 Doge, and then it's like $1. I think the most it got up to was like $3. I think at one point, but oh, it looks like we have lost Stephanie. Oh my goodness, she will be popping. Oh, she's popping back in. We're good. Hangouts likes to have technical difficulties from time to time, but we're all good. I'm gonna select another question from Dale while Stephanie's rejoining us. Oh, this is a good one. So, just be a second. Just connecting here. Hangouts can be really awesome, but sometimes it can be have a little mind of its own. So we shall see. I will be interviewing Julia Toriansky this weekend. We'll be doing a Skype interview, though, so the interview is going to be up probably beginning of next week, I'm thinking. I'm going to be doing some weekend extra interviews here, too, so definitely stay tuned. I'll be putting those out as they come up. They're going to be a little more sporadic, but I'll also have the regular Wednesday show. I'll be trying to do them live as long as Hangouts cooperates with me. So, let's see. Oh, and she's gone again. And she's back again.
Hey, sorry about that.
It's okay. She's back. All right, we're good. So. Hangouts.
It always must be a little nerve-wracking when that happens live on the air. Oh shit, is she coming back?
It's all good. I was able to bullshit my way through it, hopefully. I don't know.
Awesome.
I'll get some feedback on that.
Did you start a hula hooping intermission?
Oh, I didn't, but you know what? I need to have like one next to me in case that happens again. It's just like technical difficulties, and then I could be hula hooping or something. You know, work. You know, good idea. I'm gonna do that for real though, because I have a feeling like it's gonna be a while till Hangouts is perfected. I think so. We got some time. All right. So we're going to jump back into it. Dale has another really good question. Self-sustainability seems consistent with microbusiness and cryptocurrencies. How to introduce Bitcoin to this phenomenon? What are ideas or suggestions to speak to them. I think maybe she's trying to say, how do you communicate Bitcoin to micro entrepreneurs? How do you get them on board with it?
Yeah. I think if you show them how it helps with cash flow and how it helps with actually getting paid, that'll probably convince a lot of people, because there was a survey that I saw that while I was doing research for the talk that I gave at Bitcoin in the Beltway about microbusiness, where they said that something like 75% of small businesses like experience problems with cash flow or with having enough credit to like pay their business expenses. So Bitcoin can actually be really helpful with that. Although there is sort of a flip side of like, if they're holding a lot of Bitcoin and then the price changes, they may lose some of their cash or whatever. But they can always mitigate that by converting it to something else. Or Coinapult actually has this new feature now called locks, where you can basically send. I did a voiceover for this video too. That's how I know about it. But you can basically send Bitcoin into Coinapult, and then you can, like, let's say the Bitcoin price is $600 and you want to like lock in that value. You basically lock the Bitcoin to $600, and then when you want to withdraw it, you can withdraw it as Bitcoin, but it'll stay at that value. So Coinapult is basically doing some kind of exchange, back-end exchange on their end, but what it really allows you to do is keep a variable balance of Bitcoins in their wallet that can change with the volatility, but then you'll always have a certain amount of value in terms of dollars or gold or whatever. So that's an option too. But as far as evangelizing about Bitcoin to micro entrepreneurs, you know, some people are going to be skeptical of it, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs actually naturally have this sort of contrarian streak or maybe even libertarian streak. And if they hear about something that's outside of the system, I mean, because if you think about it, to be an entrepreneur takes a certain amount of courage, or like at least willingness to do something different, because you're not really supposed to do that. Like, everybody kind of wants you to like just get a stable job, don't post anything too wild on the internet, or else your employer, you might get in trouble with your employer, you might lose your job, and then that would be really bad. So everybody kind of wants you to like conform and like live this very safe life. But entrepreneurs are the ones that take risks. And so I think their minds may already be more open to something like Bitcoin because they've already kind of rejected the social norm of working for somebody else. So there might be just a natural fit there. I don't know, what do you think, Megan? Like, how would you try to convince someone who is a small business owner or micro business about Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, I've had varying degrees of success with that. So I think you really have to show them what's in it for them. What is their, motivation to take Bitcoin. It's very easy to use. It's very beneficial to use, especially if they're having to deal with banks or they're taking credit cards, for example. One thing vendors don't like and merchants don't like to do is take credit cards because there's credit card fees. So there are even places in town, you can go to like restaurants that are cash only and they won't take credit cards because of the high fees. So I think the high fees, when you point that out and you compare it to Bitcoin, that's one way that's been helpful for me with talking to them about it, because your business owners have that kind of independent spirit, but they also want to save money. They're highly regulated, especially down here in Florida. It's actually pretty difficult to start a small business in Florida. So if you can make the costs lower for them and emphasize how Bitcoin works on this frictionless system that's very low fees and very affordable for them to use, I think that's a good approach too. And I think that, like you said, they're already very independently minded. And, I think they're going to be open to new ideas just with that. And also getting them the information, sitting down, taking the time to talk with them, but also getting them some literature on it. I always hand out the Bitcoin Not Bombs Quick Start Guides, which are very simple, explanation, or they give you resources for very simple explanations, and resources for buying and selling bitcoins and stuff like that. So I found those to be really useful. I haven't had 100% success convincing everyone I've talked to, but I have had pretty decent success. So it's still catching on in Pensacola. It's kind of a smaller place, but I think it's definitely going to continue to grow, and we just have to emphasize how much easier and better it is to use than the current payment systems are already using, especially credit cards. So
Yeah. My favorite way to evangelize about Bitcoin to anyone is to actually give them some Bitcoin. So like
that too, yes.
I just keep small amounts of Bitcoin in my phone wallet, like on my Celium wallet on my Android phone. And if somebody
Oh, we lost her again. Goodness. All right, stand by. And she's back. Almost. Just find another question from Dale. I think this is a good one here. All right, it'll just be another second. I wish I was a voiceover artist so I could do cool voices while we're waiting, but shouldn't be too much longer. So the next question we're going to be covering is by Dale. She says, what do you think is the proportion of women who are into entrepreneurialism? I think this is a really good question because Stephanie and I have been on Women in Bitcoin panels. We were on one at PorkFest, and that video should be coming out soon. I think it'll be really interesting, and that's something we kind of see in the Bitcoin space is a fewer amount of women involved. I think you're seeing a lot more women coming into it, though, which is really good. All right.
Sorry, I think I dropped off. Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. I was just kind of talking. Dale had another good question about what do you think is the proportion of women who are into entrepreneurialism? And I was just explaining, we were on a Women in Bitcoin panel, and I think that you see the question of how many women are participating in Bitcoin come up a lot too. So
yeah, I'm totally part of the problem. I assumed Dale was a guy.
I know.
I can't tell you how many times it's happened, like where I've been on some Bitcoin space online or forum or whatever, and I have like a gender neutral username, and someone sends me messages like, "Hey man, hey dude, hey bro," That's basically just assuming, and 95% of the time they're totally right. But yeah.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I know like you've written about women in Bitcoin before, Megan, and you said like we don't really need more women just for the sake of women, right? Like, we want quality people basically, and some of them are going to be women, and that's cool, and some are going to be men. I mean, so would you say like, do you take? Sorry, I'm kind of interviewing you, but like,
It's okay. It's a discussion. It's all good.
Do you sort of take the view that like gender, like the issue of gender in Bitcoin should kind of be ignored?
I don't know that it needs to be ignored. I think the people who are interested in focusing on it should focus their time and energy into it, and the people who are interested in other projects should be focusing their time and energy on that. So I think it really comes down to the individual and what their motivation is and what their passion is in Bitcoin, and whatever direction that takes them, I think they should go full force with it. I mean, I'm not going to say, if their passion is like, let's get in bed with the regulators. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, people should do what gives them passion in Bitcoin, whatever that happens to be. And I know a lot of really awesome women who are, working and trying to target specifically women to bring them into Bitcoin. I know Sarah Blinko of Bitcoin Beauties. I just did an interview with her a couple weekends ago. She's really doing that kind of outreach, and I think that's great. Like I'm supportive of stuff like that. So yeah, I really think it comes down to the individual and where their time is going to be most valuable.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. The women that I know who are in Bitcoin are just really smart and talented, and I like that. And the men too. Like, I mean, pretty much most of the people in the Bitcoin space, or at least the ones that were kind of there from the beginning, are just like super cool, smart, and talented people, and they're awesome. So I think we're doing well on the quality department. It can be like a little bit weird when you walk into a room and you're the only woman, you know. uh, so I think, like, yeah, I can really see why somebody, you know, a woman walks into a room where there are no other women, or where there's one other woman, and she's like, I'm gonna just turn right around and walk out, you know, because it doesn't feel very comfortable. I can see that, but yeah, I don't think the solution is to rebrand Bitcoin as pink or anything like that, you know, like.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I think even something if I see someone who maybe looks a little uncomfortable, and maybe I haven't seen her around at other conferences, and she's kind of nervous or something, like my instinct would be to go up and talk to her and kind of get to know her and provide a welcoming atmosphere, because I do think there is that kind of connection with other women that women have. And if we see someone who's a little bit uncomfortable, maybe the presence of men makes them uncomfortable. If there's a lot more of them than there are females, then yeah, I think it's great to go in and make sure they're comfortable, and show them that it's not just a boys club. There's a lot that you can do as women. I think in general, women it would be good to have more women in Bitcoin from an entrepreneurial mindset. Dale's question:
Yeah.
what do you think the portion of women are in entrepreneurialism? I think there's probably a decent percentage of women who are working from home, making their own goods, and providing their own goods and services and things like that. The
I
internet has
think there
provided
are
so many
tons.
opportunities.
Yeah, I think there are tons of women. I mean, tons of women who are entrepreneurs. Like, I would even say maybe even more than men with the micro business. I don't have any statistics to back that up, but and it's usually a pretty good indication that they're at least like open-minded to ideas of freedom too. I find that those things correlate. Um, But yeah, like, it's interesting what you're saying, Megan. I mean, have you ever experienced any like harassment or like discrimination, like from being the only woman in a Bitcoin place?
I don't think I've experienced any discrimination. I've gotten a lot of respect actually from the people I've worked alongside with, and I do tend to. There are more men involved in Bitcoin, so whenever I'm doing Bitcoin projects, it just so happens that I'm usually surrounded by men, but it's never really been that much of a problem for me. As far as harassment, I really haven't gotten that much harassment. It's been more kind of in the form of maybe someone hitting on me, but I'm married. That usually deters them. I can kind of tell them, like I'm married, and maybe that will kind of make them back off. I haven't had anyone who was super, like handsy or severely harassing me. There's maybe been one instance where I was made really, really uncomfortable, and shot like a disapproving look at the person, and was kind of like, you need to kind of back off. I'm pretty good at I guess staving off that type of person, but I haven't experienced a whole lot of harassment, no, and not really discrimination though. But what about you though? Has that affected you in the Bitcoin space?
Yeah, I mean, largely no. The one thing I have been kind of frustrated about is like sort of not being taken as seriously as guys by default. And that was something that happened in science too. Like, it's just going to happen in any male. You kind of almost get used to it sometimes. Not that that's the way it should be, but you almost just learn to deal with it as though it's a normal part of life. But yeah, I mean, sometimes people will literally send me emails and say like, hey, could you forward this to Andreas? I want to make sure he sees my idea. And it's like, I'm not his secretary. It's amazing the amount of times that has happened, where someone like literally assumes that I'm Andreas's secretary, and they have no
Oh
reason to do
wow! And knowing Andreas, I mean, I'm sure that's not that cool with him.
No,
He's
I mean, he thinks it's funny. Another time, someone sent me an email that was like, um, I don't know, they wanted to promote a Bitcoin like online clothing store, and like that was accepting Bitcoin, and it sells.
Oh man, we've lost her again. We were having some spotty connection issues. I'll answer a couple more of Dale's questions. Yes, this is all recorded, Dale. You'll be able to catch the entire thing on my YouTube channel. It'll upload to YouTube after this broadcast, so you'll be able to hear the first 30 minutes that you missed. We'll get some links for you. Also, you may, for some of your other questions, you may want to contact Stephanie personally. Let's see. I'm going to grab a question. We've got a couple other ones on here. We keep losing Stephanie. Let's see. All right.
I'm back. Yeah, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Where did it leave off?
You were talking about people were thinking you were Andreas' secretary and some of the strange kind of interactions you've had with people in Bitcoin, with some of the men in Bitcoin.
Yeah, the other one was the guy who emailed me and said that he had like a website, or it wasn't even his website, it was someone else's website that sold like high fashion stuff, and they were going to accept Bitcoin. And he writes to me and says like, well, since you're a woman, I know you'll be interested in this. And I am totally not into fashion. Like, it's just not my interest. And so I was kind of weirded out by the fact that he just like assumed, and he kept like following up on it too, like really like kind of aggressive about it. And then one time I was at a conference and this video crew came up and said, you know, why aren't there any women in Bitcoin? Like, we're interviewing all the women in Bitcoin. Why aren't there any women? And they were just kind of did this nasty like ambush style interview, and then they published the video, and it had a bunch of women who clearly didn't want to be interviewed on it, and they just, you know, used the footage anyway and kind of like tried to make them look a little bit silly, and you know, that wasn't cool at all. So, and I don't think that helps get more women, obviously. So yeah, those are like probably the three worst experiences I've had. But other than that, honestly, it's been really cool. Like, for every person who acts like that, who stereotypes or you know, doesn't sort of give me credit or doesn't take me seriously, there are like 20 people who do. So so it's great. You know, there's not a lot to complain about in that department.
I'd have to agree with you. I've had, like you said, a couple kind of strange encounters, but overwhelmingly I've had a lot of support and, you know, respect from people. Really, it's a very respectful place. You know, everyone is very passionate about what they're doing and very, very intelligent. You always have very good conversations. Let's see, we got a couple more questions here. All right. This is going to kind of go back to the micro business stuff. As a small business owner and entrepreneur, since you accept Bitcoin primarily for payment, what mechanisms are you using to save for your future, such as retirement, just putting Bitcoin in a cold wallet for the future, or do you use fiat? So that's a bit of a personal question. That's from Ralph Hardy.
Yeah,
so,
I don't mind talking about that. I mean, it's not so. I do have some clients who pay me in Bitcoin, but it's not it's not like the primary thing. So most of my business is still in fiat, actually. So, you know, I do have fiats coming in as well as Bitcoins, and I just kind of, you know, a lot of the Bitcoin stuff I do sort of treat as a longer term thing. So I don't spend it all, I don't save it all, but, you know, I have sort of like my own formula for that. And yeah, I don't know.
oh, kicked off again. So yeah, as far as that's a pretty interesting question. I don't really look at it as much of I'm not trying to move my money around a whole lot with Bitcoin. I do like to set some aside. I hope it goes up in value. So I definitely, I'm putting aside as much as I can. You know, I always have to cash some in to pay bills and things like that. So, all right, we're back.
Yeah, this is like the 8th time. I'm sorry. This is getting really annoying. I was just saying that there are some people I know who do pretty much like earn their entire income in Bitcoin, and you know, they kind of just treat it the same way you would with fiat. You know, like they just cash out whatever they need to pay bills, and maybe they buy gift cards from Walmart or whatever. Now you can do that apparently, or I don't know, Amazon or Kmart or wherever with Bitcoin and buy the stuff that they need to get, pay the bills, and save the rest, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good approach. Let's see, this is a good one. Another one from Dale. A lot of online companies are US centric. The ideas sound great, yet a lot of time they're not accessible to international Bitcoiners. Checking Coinapult now, not sure if they're global. So that's interesting. I think
Actually,
I'm curious.
Coinapult is actually like kind of the opposite of what Dale described, because they actually
Yeah.
block US customers. So
Right. I was about to say they are blocking U.S. customers, and I think I wonder if you're going to see more of that with these regulations
definitely.
coming out. What are your
If
thoughts on the regulations in New York?
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, that's just what's going to happen. I mean, people are going to find a way around them. They're totally ridiculous. I really like the idea that blockchain.info had when they incorporated, I guess, which is like they've never been a US-based business. They've always been, I think they're incorporated in like the US Virgin Islands, or the British Virgin Islands, excuse me. So, I mean, they really are just kind of a global internet business. And I really like that decentralized style too. You know, like blockchain doesn't hold your private keys like Coinbase or whatever. Um, and actually, it's really interesting. There's a Wired article about Nick Carey and Brian Armstrong, who went on to found basically Coinbase on one hand and blockchain.info. And initially they were working together, and then they kind of had this argument basically over the level of involvement they wanted to have with the state. And so they split up. Their business partnership broke up because of that. And now they have these two very different Bitcoin companies. So yeah, I think blockchain and also like local Bitcoins, you know, they've got a really smart business model. I mean, how much startup capital could they have needed to start up? Not much. They just had to build a website and have it be able to support the number of users that they eventually got. But it's just, you know, a thing that enables people to trade peer to peer, and they're in Finland, and so they're sitting pretty good, I think. But yeah, I think as time goes on, no Bitcoin company in their right mind is going to want to be in the U.S. and you know, perhaps no Bitcoin user in their right mind is going to want to be in the U.S. Like, I think we should all kind of be looking at internationalizing ourselves, so that if wherever we're based happens to do something that we can't accept politically, we can just leave and go somewhere else. It's hard to do
Yeah,
that, but it's kind of necessary now.
yeah, voting with your feet, basically. And it remains to be seen how stringent these regulations are going to be. The way they're proposed now, it's not looking good at all, and I don't really see much benefit to working with these people, and you end up compromising more than I think you otherwise would have.
Yeah, and look at Charlie. I mean, Charlie. If anyone's thinking about working with regulators or whatever, I mean, I love Charlie, but I really differ from his opinion on working within the political system, because that's what he did. He was going to tell Ben Lawsky how to write the bit license so that it would be beneficial for Bitcoin people, so-called, and look what happened to him. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't win in the political system. You can't make any meaningful change, and you can't win. And so the best thing to do is opt out in as many ways as you possibly can. You know, do your business on the internet, become a citizen of the world, and you know, that's really, I think, all you can do. I mean, I would never advocate any kind of violent stuff. Like, that's not a solution either. The thing is to just peacefully opt out as much as you can in every arena that benefits you, I think.
I totally agree with that, and that's pretty much Bitcoin.bomb's position too. What we're doing right now, we're doing a kind of mocking the state kind of thing. We have our own bit license that you can buy now, and
Oh, really?
yes, we have an intergalactic bit license. See, like, we're way ahead of New York. You can get your intergalactic bit license. You're gonna be covered all over the galaxy with this thing. So definitely check out Bitcoin.bombs for that. We're issuing them on the Namecoin blockchain too. So it's a little interesting experiment. It's we're kind of thumbing our nose at the regulators and trying to have a little fun, because if you're not having fun and you're doing activism, you're doing it wrong. So we're probably gonna be wrapping this up soon. I know you're still having some connectivity issues, but
Yeah.
real quick, so for Dale, she had another question. about conferences. Are there any women's groups approaching organizers to insist a percentage of women speak or participate on panels? I know Sarah Blinko is doing a lot of outreach with women. Connie Galippi, too. She's been very active in trying to get more women speaking at conferences. I don't know that everyone's insisting on a quota yet. I know the Bitcoin in the Beltway conference had a lot more women speakers and participants than some of the other conferences, but that wasn't necessarily intentional. We were just looking for really awesome speakers. It just so happened we found a lot of really good women in there. So
you all didn't need a quota. Like the ratio came out great just on your own. But I mean, you, Megan, and Jason, who were determining who the speakers were also like really attuned to the Bitcoin community and knew a lot of the key players really well, and didn't have to rely on sort of the people who aggressively promote themselves to tell the conference organizers like who should be speaking. You know, like you knew who should be speaking, and that was awesome. There have been Connie Galippi has been awesome. Like, she has a list of female speakers that she sends to conferences and says, look, you need to invite these ladies to speak. They're all really talented and have stuff to say. And sometimes they do. Like, I've gotten some emails because of that. But the thing is, you know, a lot of these conferences kind of expect you to work for free. And they're like, yeah, come speak, but you can buy your own plane ticket and hotel room, you know, and that's not really gonna work in the long term, you know. And if they can get a bunch of speakers who are gonna be willing to pay their own way because they have Bitcoin companies and they're trying to get investors or whatever, and they've got money to spend, then they're probably going to fill the slots with those people instead. And, you know, I mean, I guess those people maybe tend to skew male. I remember there was this one Bitcoin conference that invited me to speak, and they basically had like 34 or 33 male speakers. Every single one of them was a dude. And they invited me to speak, and then I said, well, can you pay my travel costs? Because it was like a long-ass way to go there. It was in Europe. And they were like, no, we can't do that. And so it was like, seriously, you got 33 male speakers and you can't even buy a plane ticket for the one woman that you wanted to speak? Like, so I guess what I'm saying is, like, on the part of the conference organizers, it really helps if they're actually Bitcoin people and they know the people in the Bitcoin world. And it also helps if they care about having any female speakers, and if they care about having just high quality speakers in general, because, you know, I think like the kind of conference that you would put together, Megan, you actually want people who are doing Bitcoin projects, and that's not all guys. There's a lot of women doing Bitcoin projects too. Whereas, you know, certain types of conferences are just more geared towards investing in people who want to get venture capital, and so they tend to just get whoever speaks the loudest and says, hey, let me talk at your conference, you know.
Yeah, it's very, you know, the conferences are so different from each other a lot of times. So we kind of went with like a very kind of radical anti-DC regulation theme for Bitcoin in the Beltway, but also with a strong focus on charity, which there's a lot more women involved in the charity parts of Bitcoin too. But it's very, it's very conference specific, and I've kind of run into a similar issue that you have. I'll get invited to these conferences in Europe or, you know, all over the country, and they're not really willing to pay. And I think it's kind of difficult right now to maybe drum up a lot of attention for Bitcoin conferences after the Mt. Gox issues. It seems like maybe attendance hasn't been, you know, quite as high since then at some of the conferences. And then being on the other side of it, having helped organize one, money is kind of an issue unless you're getting some good sponsors in there. If you can get some good sponsors in there, then you're pretty much set. But it's very difficult to, you know, run a Bitcoin conference. Of course, I think, you know, your speakers should be covered. At the very least, you could, if you're inviting someone to speak at a conference, is cover their hotel room and travel expenses at the very least. And that's pretty much what's been my situation in any conference I've spoken at. You know, it's like, if you can cover my travel expenses and stuff, like, you know, I don't know that I don't really charge a speaking fee or anything like that, but
Mhm.
because I'm also there for the experience too. But it is
Yeah.
difficult when you get all of these invites and it's like, yeah, we really want you to come, but not so much that will actually help get you here. It's kind of
Yeah,
like, huh, okay.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And I mean, some of these conferences are charging $700 a ticket at the door, and so it's like, really, if you sold one or two tickets because of me, it would totally pay for my, travel to come here. And there's no way you can put that in your budget. I don't know. It's just, yeah, I mean, sometimes you can start to like doubt yourself when you see stuff like that, and it's like, well, really, am I bringing that much value? But like people like us we're actually working in the Bitcoin world and like doing stuff related to Bitcoin, and we do have important stuff to say, and we shouldn't like be expected to work for free, you know. And it's not just the travel and the hotel or whatever. If I were to stay home for a week and do voiceovers, I could make a lot more money than I could make just sitting at a conference, and speaking. So there's an opportunity cost as well, and that has to be considered when you're talking about inviting productive people to a conference. I don't want to just rag on conference organizers, but I think it is actually helpful to explain this stuff just from the perspective of someone who they might want to be a speaker. This is what goes through our minds, and so if you want us, you got to pay for it at least a little bit.
Yeah, and what you said about missing work, that's a huge point and something that I don't really even think of so much too. But yeah, you're losing a whole lot of time there. And it really is dependent on who's organizing the conference. I think Bitcoin in the Beltway was so different from the other ones because Jason and I are so active in the space and we know who we wanted to speak there. And, we were more connected with the speakers, whereas with these other ones, I'm not sure, if they're just trying to throw together a conference to for depending on the reason too, maybe it's just to raise money, maybe to focus on the business side of Bitcoin or something like that. So it definitely it's organizer dependent, and hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more variety coming into the space and a lot more variety of organizers too. And you're also seeing just so many conferences back to back too, and so much competition with conferences. It's
You know,
getting so many now.
I was talking to a friend a little while ago, and he said, I don't think Bitcoin is in a bubble, but I think Bitcoin conferences are in a bubble.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good way to put it. So, well, and they're cost prohibitive too. Probably my biggest criticism of the conferences I've been invited to is the ticket price is just so cost prohibitive for people. So we're trying to do something
Yeah.
completely different with Coins in the Kingdom. We want you for the price of what would be just a ticket to the conference. We want you to get your hotel room and a ticket to Disney World and a ticket to the conference and a t-shirt. Like, we're trying to make it as affordable as we can for people. So
Mm.
it's been a little bit hard. Obviously, we want to be able to pay speakers and stuff like that too. So we're hoping to have everything balance out. But we're definitely going with it with a different theme. And really, for me, it comes down to the people who need Bitcoin the most really need to have it accessible. And I think some of these, especially educational conferences, we're trying to make this one really educational. It needs to be easily accessible to them. So we're giving like students discounts. We're trying to reach out to the College Crypto Network is great about getting college student
Mm.
discounts and stuff like that. So they're really great. But even better than that, we were even talking for a while, and this kind of got placed on the back burner, but Thomas Hunt of Mad Bitcoins and then Leif and Lamar of FIBA, we were talking about doing a web conference for free, and I still want to do that at some point, just a
Cool.
live streaming free web conference where you're able to see the people you want to speak different levels from basic to advanced,
Yeah.
theory and all of that, and just make it free for people
Like,
because
were
you
you
can't
ever,
really use.
did you ever get a chance to go to Agora.io? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh, it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
it's been a couple of years since there was an Agora.io, but it's the type of conference is totally similar. It's like this bar camp kind of unconference type thing, but it's totally online, and then everything's archived obviously on YouTube, and yeah, I thought that worked out really well. Like I really enjoyed those when they were going on.
Yeah, and Paige was mentioning that too about the unconferences. Paige Peterson made
Yeah,
safe, and she's
she's
all about the
awesome.
unconference. Yeah, she's super cool. I'm gonna have her on as a guest pretty soon here too. And yeah,
Cool.
just the unconference thing is something that's very cool. You're kind of creating your own conference and stuff, and we might be a little structured, a little slightly structured with Coins in the Kingdom, but it's going to be more topic based and like panel discussion kind of audience interaction based as opposed to just focusing on personalities and like individual talks, because
Mhm.
what we kind of noticed is when people come to these conferences they really want to interact with the speakers and talk with them and ask questions. Someone like Andreas is speaking, you'll have like a line of people like ready to ask questions, and
Yeah.
people really look forward to that, and so we're going to try to just focus on that, like maybe just make that time just way larger and have kind of sit down sessions with people, so a little more intimate too. So
Yeah.
yeah, so and it'll definitely be a lot more affordable. So
Cool.
um,
I love that idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I guess we're gonna kind of wrap it up. I'm gonna end with a couple questions. What do you think are the biggest challenges Bitcoin faces as far as widespread adoption? And then where do you see the future of Bitcoin going, as far as projects or decentralized autonomous corporations?
Hmm.
What do you look forward to?
Yeah. Okay. So, as far as the challenges for adoption of Bitcoin, um, in some ways, I'm not even sure that I want Bitcoin to go mainstream. Like I do and I don't, because it seems like as it goes mainstream, it gets watered down and it gets more far away from its original roots. And it like the cool things about Bitcoin just get like it's not as cool anymore, like once it goes mainstream. And there's certainly things like Circle and, like they're obviously attempting to address the big problems of security and ease of use. That's what everyone says are the barriers to adoption, and I agree with that. But if the only way to make Bitcoin more secure and easier to use is to basically take away all of the benefits of Bitcoin, which is basically you being able to create an account whenever you want without asking anyone's permission or having to give your social security number and all that, and you being able to control your own private keys, then that's kind of a problem. So as long as like people who understand it still have the ability to use those features, I think it's fine. Um, but we can't forget why they're there in the first place. So that's why I think people like you and me, and Julia Toriansky just made this video of the Bitcoin Declaration of Independence. Did you see that?
Oh, it's so awesome. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
God, it's such a good video. Yeah, we have it up on Bitcoin Up Bombs too. So yeah, definitely check it out.
Awesome.
It's got all the badasses in Bitcoin. I felt honored to be in it. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been in a video with all these people. Like you're in there, like, and it's just like so really cool.
Yeah, that I mean, I love the video, and like just it's important for people like us, I guess, to keep like shouting from the rooftops about about the original intentions behind Bitcoin. As far as what's coming in the future, you know, everybody who gets asked this question says, "Oh, it's all going to be Ethereum and it's going to be on the blockchain. Everything you do is going to be on the blockchain. There's going to be drones doing surgery on the blockchain and stuff like that." But I guess I'm kind of old-fashioned. I like to take a step back from that question and say, I think maybe in the next 5 years, Bitcoin is going to be having its AOL moment where everyone's using it suddenly, like where the adoption just really, really increases. And I know I just said, like, I feel mixed about that happening, but I think that kind of has to happen first before we're having Ethereum drones doing surgery on the blockchain. Like, most people don't even know what Bitcoin is yet. And actually, Andreas likes to say that there are like fetish communities that have larger populations than the Bitcoin community, and it's kind of true. It's like it really puts that in perspective. So most people don't know what Bitcoin is yet, and once they do, let's see what comes out of that. Like that'll be pretty cool, and that's what I want to see first before I get too excited about all these different 2.0 technologies. Sometimes I don't even understand them, honestly. Like I'm embarrassed sometimes because I still have questions about, like, counterparty and BitShares and Ethereum and all that stuff. It's like a little hard to wrap your mind around. And so step one first, let's explain Bitcoin to more people first, and then let's worry about all these other things that are going to be building on top of it.
Yeah, I admire the ambition of all the Bitcoin 2.0 technology, and it's something in some ways I feel like I'm even still struggling to wrap my mind around some of the elements of Bitcoin too. So it's like I haven't quite made it there, but I think they're very ambitious, and I think we're going to see some really cool stuff coming out. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like let's get Bitcoin first. Let's focus on Bitcoin first. And I do apologize to Dale. I didn't get to all of your questions. She was talking about Bitcoin South Conference in New Zealand, and Tatiana Moroz is speaking. I would love to go to New Zealand. I really would. If there's any way those conference organizers can get me over there, I will be there. Like, I've always wanted to go to New Zealand. So,
that honestly does sound really, really cool. I mean, I had gone back and forth with Dale by email about that, and I was thinking maybe I would go to China or something this fall, but that doesn't appear to be working out. So unfortunately, I don't think I'll be there at this point. But Dale, if you want to talk more, I'd love to Skype sometime, or I can Skype in and meet up with your friends or whatever. That'd be cool.
Yeah, and thanks so much for the input, Dale. I really like the
awesome
and
questions.
the engaging. Yeah, I was supposed to go to Shanghai. I got invited to the Shanghai conference, and then it seems kind of weird, but didn't quite happen.
That's another one. I think we should have no shame about calling them out when they don't offer to pay. Like, these people are asking us to work for free. Like, come on.
I can't fly to Shanghai. Like, I'm not like,
Not only work for free, but like buy a $2,000 plane ticket and a hotel, however much it is for a hotel room. Flip the sleep schedule around, And if you go, it doesn't even make sense to go for like a couple days because you'll just be completely jet lagged and not able to do anything. So you got to go for like at least a week or so. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, actually, that was another conference where, I questioned, like. The reason I said Bitcoin conferences are in a bubble is because I think there are lots of people who are organizing conferences who may not have that much prior experience doing that because just some of the details of these conferences get a little disorganized. Like the Shanghai one, they announced it and they had a website, but they didn't announce the dates for it until it was like a month before it was supposed to happen. Like they just recently announced the dates and it's happening in September, I think, right?
Yeah, and there's not a whole lot of details in general, and I personally know two of the people who were featured to speak there that aren't actually speaking there, but they're featured as speakers on the website. So it seems like there's some organization issues.
Yeah, that's not cool.
But I'd love to travel somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, it's very expensive, and I think a misconception is that if you're involved in Bitcoin, you got involved in Bitcoin in like 2009, and they're like Bitcoin rich, and it's like I do not have that much Bitcoin, like straight up. I mean, it's not everyone who's involved is Bitcoin rich. So I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind.
Even if I was, like, am I entitled to spend it on your conference? Or are you entitled to my Bitcoin to spend on your conference? Like, no, not unless I want to, right?
Right, yeah. So I really hope that some of that kind of gets resolved. I really hope that these conference organizers kind of see the value in the speakers and definitely having a good variety of speakers. But that's an interesting thing about your friend saying the conferences are in a bubble. That makes sense. There are so many kind of randomly popping up and also being just very vague. And we kind of had some organizational issues with Bitcoin in the Beltways. Jason was running 30 miles a day, raising awareness for Bitcoin and homelessness. So that made things a bit complicated. But despite that, I think it worked out pretty smoothly. So I don't think that these other people don't have any excuses as far as I'm concerned. Like seeing how hard Jason was busting his ass and then like put together this conference anyway, despite running 30 miles a day. Like I can't even run 1 mile a day. I can't run at all if I'm running life, so.
Yeah, he's truly amazing. I'm like so proud of him for doing it. So cool.
Absolutely.
And it does put it in perspective for the other conference organizers. I doubt they're doing that.
Right. So yeah, when I see not a whole lot of detail on these sites, and there have been a couple other ones too. It's kind of like, what are you guys doing? Like, what's going on? So
Yeah.
I know it's really hard to organize a conference, but
There have been a few that I've heard about at the last minute where it's like, wow, that actually looks like a really cool conference. I'd love to go to that, but it's just like I didn't hear about it until the week before, you know? Why weren't they
right.
advertising it in places that I would hear about, right?
Right. Yeah, you got to get on promotion pretty early. And we kind of dropped the ball a little bit with that, with Bitcoin in the Beltway in some ways. Like it was kind of hard. We, had some last minute changes and stuff. So at least some people some feedback from what I got is it wasn't as super well promoted. But yeah, we're working on getting that better. We learned a lot of lessons from doing the first one. So like I said, Coins in the Kingdom is going to be really special, I think. So yeah, we're gonna do things a little differently and see how it works out. And I
Awesome.
think that's
I
what
would
we
like to
need in the
go to
conference
that.
space. Yes, well, I want to get you there. So
Awesome. Cool. I'll save the date.
absolutely, yes. And we could all party in Disney World on Monday after it.
That sounds awesome. Oh my god, totally. Work for myself now. No work on Monday. Woohoo.
Yes, exactly. That's the best. That is the best. Working for yourself with Bitcoin. So,
Exactly.
and then doing cool voices too. I mean, it really is like the coolest job ever. In fact, I learned one of the I believe you narrated a PGP video too.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's how I learned.
Yeah, it's if you search for encrypted Gmail tutorial or something like that, it tells you how to encrypt Gmail with Thunderbird.
Yeah, that's how I learned PGP. I was like, listen, I was like, that voice sounds really familiar. I was like, it's got to be Stephanie. Like, and it was so like well done. Like it was just very easy to understand, very clear, and
Oh,
yeah.
thank
So
you. That's so awesome.
yeah.
Well, actually, I can't take credit for writing the script. Justice Ramvier wrote the script. He's a genius. He's an awesome person, really smart guy, and taught me how to encrypt my email too. So I'm
Also,
glad
I was
you
about to
found
say you
value in the
learned so
video.
much. Oh yeah, yeah. I bet you learned so much too when you do voiceovers from the different projects, and
Yeah,
especially something like
totally.
PGP, like that was just so informative. So awesome.
Yeah,
So
the other day I narrated a video about how aluminum foil is made, which you wouldn't think is interesting, but it was. It was totally interesting in like a really nerdy way.
that does kind of sound cool. Like I really used to like those shows on the. I don't even remember what channel. It's been so long since I've had a TV, but there used to be this show like How It's Made, I think, or something.
Yeah.
It's like mundane things. You're like, how is it put together? But I would just watch it. Like I loved the shit out of it. I was just like, I was like some nerding out over like like how gummy bears are made or something. Or I don't know, like.
Yeah.
So.
I remember
Yeah.
that one on Sesame Street about like how they made crayons and they would show like or maybe it was Reading Rainbow or I don't know, some show like that where they showed like the crayon factories and like the wax and they'd pour it into those molds and like then they would wrap the wrapper around it and that was cool.
That is cool. I like stuff like that. Like I'm a nerd from I guess another category of nerdism too. I'm like kind of a literary book kind of nerd, and then also
Oh
just
yeah?
random kind of like sci-fi stuff too. So it's not really like the tech stuff is definitely different to me, but like I definitely kind of feel a kinship with my fellow nerds, like a different nerds in different ways. And that to me has always been like I always thought it was like a badge of honor kind of. I mean, like I was always kind of like an outcast in school, kind of like nerdy and bookish and stuff. But I mean, those
Yeah.
were the people that I hung out with, and they were always the most interesting. And they always had the
Mm.
coolest stories, and they were just the most, interesting. So yeah, it turns out, wait a second, the people that you were picking on in high school are saving the world. So.
Totally. Totally.
Well, awesome. Well, I think we're gonna wrap this one up. Dude, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah.
It's great hanging out with you. Pork Fest too.
It was. I
We're
had so
gonna
much fun. I'm glad we got to like see each other in person a couple months ago, and hopefully there'll be more coins in the kingdom. Or
Coins in the Kingdom. Yes.
yeah, this
So
was really fun, Megan. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate this, and yeah, it's just been really cool to talk with you.
definitely. And where can people keep up with your work? I know there's Let's Talk Bitcoin. What are some other things that you're focused on now?
So I actually have a ton of websites, and I'm really kind of bad about updating them. But you can hear me on Let's Talk Bitcoin at letstalkbitcoin.com. Free Talk Live at freetalklive.com. That's the radio show I host on Sunday nights, and it is actually a daily radio show, but I'm only on Sundays. But they have good content every day. I also volunteer with Free Aid. That's fr33aid.com. You can see what we do, and we're a Bitcoin-based charity. And also my voiceover website is smvoice.info, and that's where I try to kind of blog about my voiceover projects, but I have just so many that I haven't blogged about yet that I keep meaning to update the website. But that's basically, you can get a basic idea and find out how to contact me at smvoice.info.
Well, also, you're a very busy woman, so I'm glad you took the time to sit down with me. And that's it for this episode. We'll be doing episode 4 next Wednesday. I'm going to be doing a kind of weekend secret interview with Julia Toriansky, also known as Brave New World, this Saturday. And
Awesome.
yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So, and I believe Chris Ellis of Feathercoin will be my guest next Wednesday. I do have to get confirmed on that, but it will be someone awesome who's smarter than me regardless. And
Chris is a trip. That'll be fun too.
Oh yeah, we've already talked. We already we did another discussion it's been months now, but I mean I could listen to him for hours, just like an encyclopedia of philosophy.
I actually met up with him recently in person because I was in England and he lives there, and so I wanted to introduce him to my friends. So we all met up for lunch, and he was pretty quiet, like he ate his lunch, and then he just starts going, the universe may or may not exist, and it's all blockchain, and it was really far out.
Dude, he's so deep, and he just goes so deep, and I love it. We got to hang out so much, at Bitcoin in the Beltway and PorkFest too. He even stayed. Awesome. He came up to PorkFest, and it was just really cool. So hopefully he can join us next Wednesday. So definitely stay tuned for that. Thanks so much again to the audience for asking such awesome questions. And well, until then, keep calm and encrypt on.